Tonight we'll drift into a world of soft lamplight, faint morning drafts and the quiet rustle of linen. You're safe here. Let your shoulders loosen, let your jaw slacken, and simply be. If the day has been noisy, dim your lights now. Tuck yourself under your blanket the way one might tuck in a letter inside an envelope, snug and hidden. And as you settle in, I wonder, where in the world are you listening from tonight? And what time is it there in your own quiet corner? If this calm journey helps you unwind, perhaps tap like and subscribe. Only if it feels right. Nothing urgent, nothing pressing. Just a small gesture, as effortless as placing a teacup back into its saucer. And now, let's wander, slowly and curiously, into what it really felt like to wake up in a Victorian bedroom. Let me tell you what it really felt like to wake up in a Victorian bedroom. Not the glossy version in paintings, not the tidy museum sets, but the way a body actually greeted the day in a room heavy with drapery and coal dust. The first thing, oddly enough, was not sight, but smell. Imagine you've been tucked beneath layer after layer of blankets, some stuffed with feathers, others lined with wool, and your nose peeks out into the air. The faint tang of coal lingers from last night's fire, mixed with the cold sweetness of damp stone. It isn't unpleasant, more like the smell of an old library where dust has mingled with time itself. The sound is next. A fireplace doesn't roar in the morning, it sighs. If you were fortunate, the maid had come in before dawn to stir the ashes and set a fresh flame, so you'd hear the soft crackle of kindling catching. Otherwise it was silence. The kind of silence that is so complete you notice your own heartbeat, your own small movements beneath the quilt. Now, the light. Curtains in Victorian rooms were heavy, thick enough to block drafts. When they were drawn shut, the morning sun didn't spill in so much as sneak through in thin, dusty ribbons. Those ribbons made the room look as though it floated in a haze, soft and indistinct, like a memory you can't quite pin down. I remember once reading that in 1843 Charles Dickens described London mornings as a foggy revelation thick with the ghosts of night. And that's what waking up felt like. Not an alarm, not a sharp interruption, but a slow rising of ghosts into daylight. And the bed itself, well, these weren't the sleek mattresses of today. The frame might creak if you shifted, the ropes holding the mattress sometimes sagged, and the feather bed had a way of swallowing you whole. It was less orthopedic support and more like sleeping in a giant pastry, soft, uneven and faintly lumpy in the middle. Like a croissant someone had sat on but still warm. I wonder, have you ever woken up and thought for a moment that you'd rather stay inside your blanket cocoon forever? That feeling was practically designed into Victorian beds. They were so heavy, so layered that peeling yourself out was like breaking free of a chrysalis. Except instead of becoming a butterfly, you mostly just became a person with cold toes. The ritual of actually rising was its own slow performance. Dressing gowns, chamber pots, pitchers of water left in porcelain basins. The water, by the way, was always colder than you expected, as if it had been waiting all night to surprise you. Washing your face felt like plunging into a stream, a shock that snapped you awake faster than any espresso shot could dream of doing. And then there was the breakfast smell, drifting faintly if you were lucky enough to have someone preparing it. Toast browned on an iron rack by the fire. The faint sweetness of jam, often more tart than modern versions. Perhaps a hint of bacon or kippers if the household fancied something strong. The scents teased you out of bed, coaxed you toward the day. Even the floor beneath your feet told a story. Bare wood, sometimes carpeted in worn rugs that held the chill. Each step a little reminder that heat in Victorian homes was never central, never even. Warmth was patchwork, glowing by the fire, fading as you walked toward the window. And yet there was comfort in the routine. The way morning unfolded, not with a jolt, but with a sequence of sensations. Smell, sound, light, touch, taste. Each one slow, layered, patient. It was as though the room itself was teaching you how to be awake. The bedroom has let us go, but the house is not yet done with its quiet lessons. As you step softly onto the landing, the stairwell greets you with the kind of silence that has been listening all night. The banister is polished, Not by a servant's rag this morning, but by countless hands before yours, generations leaving their faint sheen of touch. Each step downward creaks like an old friend clearing its throat, never quite silent, never quite loud. At the bottom of the stairs, another door waits, modest but certain, the dressing room. Here the air is cooler, a little firmer, scented with lavender sachets tucked in drawers and sprigs of rosemary laid carefully atop folded linen. Victorians adored these herbal comforts. Lavender, they believed, could calm the nerves. Rosemary, they said, sharpened the mind. And so, in this small chamber, you are greeted not by grandness, but by these quiet botanical companions. The wardrobe looms patiently, a wooden sentinel of polished mahogany. When you open it, the hinges sigh in a voice as old as the house itself. Inside, layers of fabric wait like stacked seasons. Wool that carries the faint smell of sheep and smoke. Cotton that has gone faintly soft from years of laundering. Linen that wrinkles no matter how carefully it was pressed. Each garment is both practical and symbolic, shielding the body from drafts while also whispering the day has expectations. Dressing in the Victorian age was a performance in miniature, and you are both actor and audience. The corset waits, laces coiled like sleepy snakes. Hooks and eyes blink from chemises and stays. Stockings lie folded like long sighs waiting for garters. Each fastening is deliberate and each demands patience. No zippers to rush you, no elastic to forgive you. Only buttons and ties and ribbons that require the fingertips to remember their duties. Imagine fastening a dozen pearl buttons by candlelight. The room still hushed, your hands moving almost of their own accord. The action is tedious and soothing at once, a kind of meditation. Isn't there comfort in repetition? In doing something because it has always been done, not because it is swift. Once corseted and clothed, you draw on a woolen shawl, its scratchy warmth both irritating and reassuring, like an old aunt who scolds but also serves the best soup. Gloves wait nearby, supple leather softening with each use, shaping themselves to your hands as though learning your secrets. A bonnet rests on the stand, framing your face in the polite architecture of ribbons. Each piece of clothing is less about vanity and more about belonging. You are now prepared not just for weather, but for society's gaze. While you dress, the house stirs. In the kitchen below, firewood pops as the cook sets pans in place. The clink of crockery, the low hum of water warming, the faint rush of the scullery maid drawing buckets from the pump. All of it is a background hum, a kind of household heartbeat. Outside the walls, horses stamp in their traces, carriages clatter on cobbles, and a newspaper boy cries headlines in a voice far too large for his frame. Great exhibition marvels, he might be shouting. It is 1851 after all. The Crystal Palace of glass and iron has caught the imagination of the whole city, and here you are, tying your final ribbon, smoothing your skirts or straightening your cravat, knowing that the world outside is brimming with inventions and wonders. Yet your own world remains measured in lavender sachets and polished shoes, in patience and small motions. The scent of breakfast arrives like a gentle invitation. Toast again, browned carefully over flame. Marmalade glistening, sharp and sweet, ready to bite your tongue awake. A bowl of porridge waits, the oats swollen and soft, kissed with milk and a thread of treacle. Have you ever tasted treacle in the quiet of morning? It clings to the spoon and to your patience thick as dusk, yet somehow warming, a reminder that sweetness doesn't have to hurry. You eat slowly, steam rising from the bowl, while the clock ticks on the mantel. Each bite fills more than your belly, it fills the silence. The butter melts into toast with a hiss so faint it's almost a sigh. Tea waits nearby, strong and dark, the kind that clings to the back of your throat and convinces your body that the day is possible. You stir it idly, the spoon clinking against porcelain, and realise that even this small sound has a rhythm, a cadence that belongs to the house itself. There is nothing rushed here. No alarms, no instant coffee, no microwave hum. Only rituals, deliberate and layered, as if each garment, each bite, each sip is a rung in the ladder out of sleep. And when you finish, when the last spoonful of porridge is gone, the tea drained to its fragrant leaves, you rise slowly. The dressing room has completed its task. You're clothed, warmed, fed, and prepared. The house is satisfied, and so are you. And as you step toward the next doorway, the lavender sachets and folded linen seem to bow in farewell, whispering, "Go gently, the day is waiting." The morning has unfolded its first layers. The warmth of the bed, the patience of dressing, the taste of porridge and marmalade. Yet the house has another ritual to offer before it considers you truly awake, the ritual of washing. Step with me now into the washstand corner. It is not a grand room, no tiled sanctuary of running water. In the Victorian bedroom, washing was contained to porcelain basins, pitchers and towels that smelled faintly of soap and starch. The washstand waits like a sensible aunt. A wooden frame, sturdy and modest, holding a jug that glimmers in the pale ribbon of morning light. The jug is filled with water drawn the night before, cool and unyielding from the pump. No matter the season, it carries the same chill, an uncompromising honesty that startles the skin awake. You pour it into the basin, and it lands with a splash that sounds far louder than it should in the hush of the room. The sound is a kind of baptism, echoing off plaster walls, declaring the day begun. Imagine cupping your hands, dipping into that water. Your fingers go numb almost instantly, and when you raise the handful to your face, the shock is like a quick sentence punctuated by commas of dripping. It is not cruel, but brisk, corrective, as if the water is a tutor reminding you of your lessons. A gasp escapes you, not voluntary, but demanded, and in that gasp, sleep loosens its hold for good. Soap waits in a dish nearby. Carbolic, plain, it smells sharp and medicinal. You work it between your palms, and the suds rise reluctantly, bubbles clinging to the morning air. Have you noticed how washing with soap makes the skin squeak faintly under your hands, like a clean violin string? That squeak is oddly satisfying, proof that something invisible has been scoured away. The towel is coarse, nothing like the plush fabrics of later centuries. It scratches as you pat yourself dry, and yet there is comfort in that scratch, as though the towel itself is insisting on circulation, coaxing warmth back into your cheeks. You rub a little harder, and suddenly the skin glows with life again, pink and fresh, ready to meet the world. Outside, costermongers are beginning their cries. "Apples and pears," someone shouts, the words tumbling into the street like dice rolled on stone. The sound filters faintly through the window, softened by curtains, mingling with the last splash of water in the basin. The city is awake, but here in this chamber the ritual is still your own. On the washstand shelf rests a small comb, its teeth catching on tangles. You draw it slowly through your hair, each pull accompanied by the faint whisper of strands arranging themselves into order. There is something soothing in this too, the way the comb imposes quiet discipline, like the stroke of a paintbrush across canvas. If you lean toward the glass, the mirror greets you again. The reflection is sharper now, cheeks flushed, hair tamed, eyes brighter. It is a face that belongs not just to the bed, but to the day. You nod faintly at yourself, and the mirror, obliging as always, nods back. A plate sits waiting, not far from the basin, a reward for completing the chilly ritual. On it rests a slice of toast, golden and crisp, spread this time with jam. Jam in the Victorian age was not the sweet, spreadable jelly we know, but something denser, tartar, perhaps black currant, its flavour deep as a hymn. You bite into it, and the taste is sharp, almost shocking, like the water, but kinder. It pulls you fully into the moment, wakes the tongue as surely as the basin woke the skin. There is a curious thought. Have you ever noticed how different foods taste depending on silence? In this quiet room, even jam seems amplified, its tartness more vivid. The toast crunches loudly, the butter melts more slowly. Every sense feels magnified by the stillness. The washstand has done its part as surely as the bed and the wardrobe. Together, these small rituals, washing, dressing, eating, form a choreography of waking that is far gentler than alarms or screens. Each step moves you from dream to day, but never in a rush. And now, as you set the towel neatly back on its peg, as you sip the last of your tea, the house breathes with you. The fire sighs in the grate. The street calls faintly beyond the glass. The room itself seems to say you are ready. And so, with hands freshly dried and spirit freshly stirred, you leave the washstand behind, stepping once more toward the hallway, where the curtains are already parting for the day's next quiet scene. The air has shifted. You have left the basin behind, your skin tingling faintly from the brisk water, your hair combed into order, and the house gently urging you onward. Ahead waits the window, tall and heavy, curtained in thick fabric meant to hold back the draughts of England's uncertain climate. The gaslight sconce on the wall still holds its faint scent of last night's flame. Though extinguished, it lingers, a ghost of heat, metal warmed and cooled again, as if remembering what it once was. You reach for the curtain. The velvet resists at first, reluctant as though it has sworn an oath never to let go of the night. But you tug again and the cloth gives way, folding back with a weighty sigh. And there it is, the morning light. Victorian windows were not generous by modern standards. The glass, sometimes uneven, rippled faintly, bending the outside world as though you were gazing into water. Through those warped panes, sunlight arrives not as a flood, but as a series of soft ribbons, fractured and glowing. They cut across the room like quiet brushstrokes, each beam filled with dust motes that drift lazily, golden in their suspended dance. You stand in that glow for a moment, breathing it in. Doesn't morning light always smell different? Somehow cleaner when it has had to struggle past curtains and coal smoke to reach you? The sash window groans as you push it open, wood swollen from damp fights against your efforts. Then, with a reluctant creak, it yields, and a ribbon of outside air slips in. Cool, fresh, tinged with the faint taste of coal, damp stone, and, if you inhale carefully, the yeast of bread rising at the nearby bakery. Close your eyes and breathe. The city is beginning to compose itself, each sound layering atop the other. Hoofbeats clatter in rhythm, carriage wheels roll with low thunder. A milkman clinks bottles together as he makes his rounds. Somewhere faintly a baker's boy calls out fresh buns for sale, and beneath it all the hum of London's restless energy steady and sure. You return to the hearth and pour tea. Steam curls upward, translucent as silk. The cup warms your fingers, its porcelain fine but sturdy. Alongside, on a small plate, rests a Chelsea bun, sticky, sweet, coiled with currants and spice. You break off a piece and it clings stubbornly to your fingers, as though reluctant to leave its spiral home. The taste is a gentle surprise. Sugar softening the tart bite of currants, cinnamon humming in the background. The closest thing, perhaps, to a Victorian cinnamon roll, though a bit more polite, a little less showy. Isn't it funny how something so simple can feel like a festival in the mouth? The bun disappears slowly, bite by bite, as you sip your tea. The bitterness of the drink and the sweetness of the bread balance one another perfectly, like two musicians playing in harmony. Outside the window, a newsboy's voice rises, carrying stories of invention, politics, and weather. Headlines that seem to stretch the city outward, promising marvels in glass palaces or warnings of storms to come. Yet here inside all is still. The fire cracks once, approving of your pause. The mantel clock ticks with its calm, even rhythm. The world spins at its dizzying pace, but you remain anchored in this small, golden-lit room. You lean your forehead briefly against the cool pane of glass. Beyond lies a city on the edge of change. Factories already whirring, railways carving lines across the land. Yet within these walls, life remains bound by curtains, coal fires, and slow mornings. Perhaps that contrast is what makes the era so compelling, the grand spectacle outside and the intimate rituals within. You close the sash window again, leaving just a whisper of air to thread through the gap. The curtain is drawn half across once more, muting the brightness to a soft hum. And as you set your empty cup back on its saucer, as you lick the last trace of sugar from your thumb, the house seems to nod with quiet satisfaction. The window has offered its gift. Light. Air. The reminder of a world both near and far. You're awake now, not just in body but in spirit. And as you step back from the pane, dust motes still drifting in golden currents, the day ahead waits like a storybook, its next page already turning. The light has found us, seeping past curtains and sash windows, draping the room in its patient ribbons. Now it is time to listen more closely, not to the house itself, but to the street beyond. Victorian mornings were never truly silent. They began with a symphony of practical sounds, each note belonging to a trade, a habit, or a duty that repeated day after day. First comes the post. Ever since the penny post of 1840, the morning letter has become a small ceremony. The slot rattles faintly, and the sound carries through the hallway like the soft clatter of a spoon against porcelain. A folded envelope lands quietly on the rug, its wax seal pressed like a sleepy eye. There is something intimate about it, isn't there? A letter that travelled across streets, perhaps even across counties, delivered for a single penny and now resting in your hand. Then, the milk. Outside, the milkman rattles his pails, tin against tin, sharp and cheerful. Each clink is a promise of breakfast richness, of porridge made creamier, of tea poured smoother. You imagine the milk cooling in tall cans, capped and waiting, its surface trembling slightly as the cartwheels jolt along cobblestones. Listen carefully, and you'll hear the lamplighter too, though his work is already finished. He hums softly as he makes his way home, a tune too low to catch the words, but steady enough to keep step. By dawn, his lamps are dark, their glass globes still faintly warm from the night, each one a star folded back into its case. The sharpest voice belongs to the newspaper boy. His call slices through the muffled morning like a gull across waves. He shouts of politics, weather, and the curiosities of the world. Sometimes his news is alarming. Wars, debates, disasters. Sometimes it is mundane. Fairs, advertisements, new machines promising to save labour but rarely to save time. In the 1850s, he might have cried about the railways, about trains faster than horses, or the marvel of telegraph wires carrying words faster than any boy could shout. His voice is young, but the city listens. Inside the house, these sounds mingle with the rustle of paper. You've opened that letter now, the seal broken with a neat snap. Perhaps it is nothing more than a cousin's news or a merchant's account or a friend's careful script describing the dampness of their own morning. Yet even such small details feel precious, as if the ink itself were warm from the writer's hand. You nibble a corner of oatcake as you read. It is not extravagant, only flour and butter pressed into a round, but the taste is grounding, simple as a handshake. The oatcake flakes slightly at the edge, leaving a faint dusting on your lap, but it pairs well with the hot tea beside you. Together they feel like two sides of the same story, one steady, one warming. Isn't it curious how sound can flavour food? The clatter of the milk pail seems to sweeten the oatcake. The cry of the newspaper boy sharpens the bitterness of tea. Even the faint hum of the lamplighter lingers like a low note beneath it all. Breakfast is no longer just taste, it is symphony. The portraits on the walls seem to approve, their painted eyes watching as you fold the letter and slip it back into its envelope. They too have lived mornings like this, with the same oatcakes, the same tea, the same chorus of street cries weaving in through the windows. There is something eternal in it, something unchanging, as if the city itself knows how to cradle its inhabitants gently awake. With breakfast done, you set aside your plate, wipe the crumbs from your fingers, and rise. The shawl waits for your shoulders, warm as a second pair of arms. You draw it close, its wool scratchy but loyal, and glance at the hallway mirror. Your hair is arranged, your collar neat, your expression calm. The reflection nods faintly back, a quiet assurance that you are ready. You place a hand on the polished banister. It feels cool, smooth from years of passing palms, and as you step toward the stairs, the house exhales again. The clatter outside grows softer, as though the world beyond is content to wait until you are ready. And so, shawl drawn, letter folded, tea finished, you descend into the day. The street greets you with its patchwork of sounds, milk, post, news, horses, carriages, and yet, wrapped in the house's lingering warmth, you feel untouched, unhurried. The morning has given you its gifts, letters, oatcakes, the symphony of the city, and as you step onto the landing, the house closes this chapter behind you, guiding you gently onward. Beds decide more than sleep. They decide mornings, the way you rise, the way you stretch, even the way you sigh at the thought of leaving. All of it is shaped by what cradled you through the night. In the Victorian age, beds were characters in their own right. Some were indulgent, heavy with carved wood and velvet hangings, canopies draped like stage curtains. Others were iron, plain and practical, the new fashion of the 1850s, praised for their ability to resist pests and squeaks. Whichever you woke in, the bed spoke first in the morning, before your own voice did. Imagine loosening the quilt and feeling its weight cling stubbornly, as if it had grown fond of you in the dark. Feather mattresses sighed beneath you, stuffed generously but unevenly, so that you sank into soft valleys and rose into curious hills. To sleep tight was not a phrase of comfort, but a genuine instruction. The ropes that supported the mattress needed tightening, otherwise you would roll into a sagging smile of hempen down. If you slept poorly, the bed remembered. It creaked its disapproval as you shifted, reminding you of every turn. If you slept well, it held you even after waking, reluctant to let you go. Isn't it strange how furniture can be clingy? Almost like an affectionate friend who insists you stay for one more story, one more cup of tea. At the foot of the bed, a warming pan had done its work the night before. A metal pan filled with hot coals slipped between sheets to chase away the cold. Now only its faint metallic tang remains, along with the memory of warmth that has since wandered away. On particularly biting nights, a hot brick wrapped in flannel had served the same purpose, a kind of Victorian nightlight, glowing invisibly beneath the blankets. You swing your legs out and the floor greets you coolly. Rugs soften some of the wood, but not enough. Toes curl instinctively, testing the chill like a cautious swimmer dipping into a pond. You stand slowly, body still drowsy, and the bed creaks once more, as though sighing in farewell. Behind you, the quilt falls back into place, a small collapse of fabric that seems disappointed. Some mornings, you would linger to make the bed at once, pulling covers tight, smoothing wrinkles with deliberate care. A tidy bed meant a tidy conscience, or so the house whispered. The coverlet, embroidered with faint patterns of roses or vines, shone with duty when stretched flat. Pillows were plumped, the bolster aligned like a sentinel, sheets tucked as neatly as envelopes. In this way, the bed became not only a place of rest, but a declaration. The night is finished, the day has begun. Of course, there were less tidy mornings. Days when the bed was left in a gentle disarray, pillows squashed, quilts tangled, the faint impression of your body still visible in the feathered valleys. Even then, there was comfort in knowing that the bed would wait patiently for your return, forgiving the neglect. Furniture in this era often carried personalities, and beds were the forgiving kind. Breakfast sometimes arrived here, if you were fortunate, a tray balanced with tea, toast, perhaps a slice of cake. The taste of butter melting into bread while you sat propped against pillows was a luxury, one that blurred the line between dream and waking. Imagine nibbling a corner of toast while the bed still cradled your back, steam rising from tea like another quilt of invisible warmth. In that moment, the bed became a dining chair, a lounge, and a confidant all at once. Have you ever noticed how pillows hold memories? Rest your cheek on one, and it still smells faintly of lavender water sprinkled the night before, or of the candle extinguished at the bedside. Each crease in the linen tells a story of hours passed in sleep, of dreams folded into fabric. To press your face into it again in the morning is to borrow a fragment of night one last time before letting it go. You glance at the headboard, at the canopy if there is one, and realize how much the bed frames the room itself. Without it, the space would be hollow, incomplete. With it, the room has purpose, rhythm, gravity. The bed is both anchor and stage, and every morning begins as a kind of performance of parting. You leave it reluctantly, it lets you go slowly, and together you agree to meet again when dusk returns. And so, with one last smoothing of the coverlet, one last tug of the sheet, you step away. The bed creaks, perhaps in complaint, perhaps in blessing. The floor waits, the hallway beckons, and the day stretches open like the quilt you have just folded. The bed rests, the house stirs, and you, gently, are carried forward. The bed has released us, the washstand has scrubbed us, The window has shared its light, and the hallway has whispered its sounds. Now, at last, the house invites us toward its true centerpiece of morning, the table, where breakfast waits like a ceremony. Victorian breakfasts were not shy affairs. They could be hearty, even theatrical, a chorus of dishes prepared to meet the demands of a day that often began early and stretched long. And at the heart of it all, Mrs. Isabella Beeton, whose book of household management appeared in 1861, the unspoken conductor of countless kitchens. Her recipes, instructions, and small admonitions hovered invisibly over the plates, reminding cooks to balance thrift with generosity, plainness with pride. Picture the dining room as we enter it. The table is dressed not in extravagance but in dignity. A white cloth smooths itself across the wood, ironed into obedience, corners falling just so. China plates, thin yet sturdy, await their burdens. Silverware glimmers in the pale light, polished so well you could almost see your reflection in the curve of a spoon. A teapot sits proudly at the centre, its spout steaming faintly, as if breathing for the whole room. The smells are the first gift. Eggs, freshly gathered, sizzling in a pan with butter that hisses approvingly. Kippers, smoked and rich, their scent curling like a story told beside the fire. Bread toasted over the grate, edges browned unevenly, wearing their imperfections with charm. Marmalade glistening in its jar, a golden bitter invitation to spread both sweetness and sting across the morning's bread. And porridge, thick and humble, steaming quietly in its bowl, plain at first glance but waiting for treacle to swirl through it like ink through paper. Imagine sitting down, shawl still wrapped across your shoulders, hands warming on the side of your teacup. The chair creaks, the spoon clinks, the fire hums in the grate. You break a piece of toast, butter melting instantly into a glossy sheen. The first bite is sharp with marmalade, bitter and bright, almost a jolt like the Victorian version of espresso. Then comes the porridge, softening everything again, heavy and slow, as though the oats themselves want you to take your time. Have you ever noticed how food can anchor you in the moment? Each mouthful is a tiny weight, holding you steady in the here and now. Eggs slide across your tongue buttery and smooth. A forkful of kedgeree, rice, fish, curry spices, surprises you with its warmth, the closest thing the Victorians had to a breakfast bowl. The kippers bring smoke and salt, a flavour bold enough to remind you that the sea is never far away in this island nation. Each taste is a story, each story a page in the same book. Conversation, if there is any, is hushed. Family spoke in low tones, words softened by steam and clink. The loudest voice is the kettle, singing gently as it cools. Newspapers might be unfolded, rustling softly as headlines are read aloud. Telegraph lines stretched to another county, one voice might say, or new machinery to spin more cotton. The news of invention slips in beside the butter and jam, reminding everyone that the world is moving faster outside, even as the room insists on its calm. A napkin is folded on your lap, its edges crisp, its purpose almost ceremonial. You raise your cup, sip your tea, dark, steady, slightly bitter. Sugar, if you add it, melts instantly, disappearing as though it never existed. Isn't that a curious thought, that sweetness can vanish but still leave its memory behind? The Victorians understood that well. Much of their food carried both comfort and challenge, sweetness and sharpness, never just one or the other. The meal is not hurried. Each bite feels deliberate, each sip unspools slowly into the morning air. The fire burns low, steady, unbothered. Outside, hoofbeats pass, but the window filters them into a distant rhythm, a heartbeat belonging to the city, not to you. When the plates are cleared, when the teapot is lighter and the napkins folded once again, the dining room sighs with satisfaction. It has performed its role. The breakfast has not only fed your body but has marked the passage of time, the shift from night into day. You rise, smoothing the cloth across your lap, tucking the chair neatly back into place. The room feels lighter now, as though the steam and warmth have softened even the wallpaper's roses into smiles. And as you step toward the doorway, you carry with you the lingering tastes. Bitter orange, smoky fish, buttery eggs, sweet treacle, all woven together into a tapestry of quiet strength. Breakfast has ended, but its memory will hum through the rest of the day, steady as the clock on the mantel. The table is cleared, the tea has cooled, and the day has placed its first firm foot upon the floor. Yet no Victorian morning would be complete without the heartbeat of the kitchen, the warm, flour-dusted world where ovens tick, dough rises, and small miracles of food appear in steady rhythm. Step with me now into that room. The door swings open to reveal air already heavy with the perfume of yeast, butter, and smoke. The hearth here is broader, the fire more industrious. Black iron pots hang patiently, their bellies warm from the flames, while baking tins wait like soldiers in neat rows. The kitchen is alive before the rest of the house, and it greets us not with words but with scent. On the table, a dusting of flour lies like snow across the wood. A rolling pin rests there, its handles worn smooth from years of palms, pressing, turning, flattening. Dough is spread beneath it, pliant and breathing, a living thing that resists and yields in equal measure. Press your hand into it and it pushes back, soft yet certain, like the paw of a sleepy animal. Today the kitchen is making cakes, the small, sensible kind, not grand affairs for parties. Seed cake is first. It is an old favourite, flavoured with caraway, those tiny seeds that spark on the tongue with a faint anise bite. The batter is thick, spooned carefully into a tin, then slid into the oven, where it rises slowly, confidently, filling the room with a smell that is both sharp and sweet. Imagine tasting it fresh, the crumb dense but tender, each bite like a quiet conversation that lingers longer than expected. Beside it another treat waits, hot hand pies. These are no delicate pastries but sturdy, practical bundles, sealed edges crimped firmly, ready to be carried in a pocket or eaten on the walk to market. Steam curls out when one is broken open, revealing fillings of spiced meat or sugared apple. They are the Victorian cousin to something familiar today, the closest thing to a hot pocket, though far richer and less hurried. Can you picture biting into one, the crust crisp at the edges, soft at the centre, heat blooming across your lips like a whispered secret? The kitchen hums with small sounds, the scrape of the poker stirring coals, the rattle of a spoon against a mixing bowl, the faint hiss of butter melting in a pan. Even the cat curled near the fire adds to the music with its soft purr, as though auditioning for the part of kitchen supervisor. Have you ever noticed how kitchens talk? Not with words, but with rhythms, the kneading thump, the whisking rush, the oven's tick as it holds its heat. Each noise is comforting like notes in a lullaby. A Victorian kitchen may lack the hum of refrigerators or the ping of microwaves, but it speaks just as clearly in a softer, older language. The air is warmer here than in the rest of the house. You shed your shawl, draping it over a chair, and roll up your sleeves. A spoonful of batter finds its way to your lips, and the taste is raw but promising. Sugar and spice waiting for the oven to transform them. You lick your finger clean, smiling at the simplicity of it. Have people ever resisted the temptation to taste the mixture before it is ready? Likely not. The oven door creaks open, releasing a wave of heat. The cakes inside are browning now, tops domed, edges pulling gently from the tins. The smell is intoxicating, rich and thick, clinging to your hair, your sleeves, your very skin. It is a perfume stronger than any lavender sachet, and far more inviting. When the cakes are pulled free, the kitchen quiets, as though holding its breath for approval. A knife slides in and comes out clean, the crumbs springy, the crust golden. You cut a slice, steam curling upward, and take a bite. The seed cake crumbles politely, caraway pricking your tongue like tiny fireworks, butter smoothing the edges. It is not flashy, but it is honest, filling and comforting. Food that does not try to impress, but simply to accompany. Outside, you hear the faint call of vendors. A woman with apples, a man with greens, their voices weaving with the clop of hooves and the squeal of cartwheels. The city beyond is hungry too, its appetite matched only by its noise. But here in the kitchen, time slows. You sip milk warm from the jug, nibble at the hot pie cooling on the board, and listen to the oven ticking itself to sleep. Isn't there something grounding in kitchens? They remind us that life is built not on spectacles, but on repetition. bread baked again and again, butter churned in steady rhythm, cakes rising in familiar tins. Comfort lies not in novelty, but in knowing what will happen, in tasting what has been tasted before. And so, with crumbs on your lips and warmth in your chest, you leave the kitchen behind, its air rich with flour and spice. The cat stirs, stretches and curls again, as if promising to guard the hearth until your return. The cakes will cool, the pies will vanish, and the kitchen will ready itself for another day, another repetition, another comfort. The door closes softly, and you carry with you the lingering scent of seed cake, a memory that will follow you through the corridors like a faithful shadow. The warmth of the kitchen still clings to your sleeves, the smell of seed cake trailing like a shadow. But the house has another flavour to offer, one less sweet, one more surprising. For Victorians, mornings were not only sugared buns and porridge, sometimes they leaned toward the savoury, the bold, even the peculiar. Imagine the dining table again, only this time the plates hold dishes with stronger voices. Mushrooms fried in butter, their edges darkened, their centres soft as velvet. Kidneys cooked gently, their flavour rich and metallic. A taste that divides opinion, loved by some, refused by others. And of course the famous kippers, smoked herring with a scent so confident it could travel through a closed door and knock politely before entering your nose. The mushrooms arrive first. You spear one with a fork and it yields easily, glistening with butter. The taste is earthy, like a forest after rain, as if the woods themselves had condensed into a single bite. Isn't it curious how food can carry landscapes? One mushroom, and suddenly the memory of damp leaves and moss rises, even if you never stepped outside. The kidneys come next, sliced neatly, served with toast. Their flavour is bolder, heavier, something that makes you pause mid-bite. They are not polite like porridge, not sweet like marmalade. They demand attention like a stern tutor correcting your handwriting. For some, they were nourishment. For others, a challenge. Yet in their own way, they too belong to the rhythm of the Victorian morning. And then the kippers. Their skin gleams bronze, their flesh flakes into tender pieces. The first taste is smoke and salt, intense but satisfying, like the sea compressed into food. With them, you feel close to the coast, even in the heart of London. You sip tea afterward, letting the bitterness balance the salt, and together they settle like two old friends bickering quietly but fondly. Have you ever thought of how different mornings can be shaped by food? A sweet breakfast makes the day feel soft, unhurried, like a gentle hand on your shoulder. A savoury one, rich with smoke and salt, gives the morning a sharper edge, a readiness, as if to say, face the day with your chin up. The clink of cutlery fills the room, small metallic chimes against porcelain. The mantel clock ticks, steady as ever, each sound a reminder that time is moving. Yet here, time feels generous. You chew slowly, letting each bite tell its story, letting the steam from the teacup blur the edges of the world. On the wall, wallpaper patterned with roses seems to lean closer, watching quietly. The fire hums in the grate, embers glowing like the heartbeats of the room. Even the air carries flavour. Smoke from the fish, butter from the mushrooms, faint sweetness still lingering from cakes baked earlier. It all mingles, and none of it clashes. The room has become a stew of scents, layered and slow. Victorian cookbooks, like Mrs. Beeton's, often listed these items side by side, practical and without fuss. One kidney sliced served upon toast, she would note, or a pair of kippers broiled sent table hot. No embellishment, no flourish, and yet in the eating they became more than mere sustenance. They became the flavour of a particular kind of morning, a morning that carried both comfort and challenge. When you're finished, the plates are stacked, little moons nested together. The knife rests neatly across the fork as though bowing in conclusion. The air is quieter now, softer. The flavours linger on your tongue, each one leaving behind a memory. Earth, iron, smoke. You rise, wiping your hands against a napkin that carries the faint scent of lavender starch. The chair creaks in farewell. The room seems satisfied, as though it has given you its best offerings and can now rest. And as you step toward the window, the world outside stirs once more. Voices calling, wheels turning, the city stretching into its full stride. Yet within you, the morning's flavours hum quietly, anchoring you in the calm rhythm of the house. Breakfast has shifted, savoury and strong, and with it the day has found a new note. The savoury notes still linger, mushrooms, kippers, the faint sharpness of kidneys. But now the morning draws us outward, toward the bustle of the streets. For as calm as a Victorian bedroom might be, the city beyond had its own flavours to offer, and none more curious than the delicacies sold near the river. Step with me to the Thames, its water broad and restless, carrying both trade and rumour. The air here is sharper, tinged with salt and smoke, with the metallic tang of iron bridges rising and the faint musk of barges sliding slowly across the current. In the distance, gulls wheel and shout as though arguing over ownership of the morning, and lining the banks, stalls and carts display foods that might seem peculiar to us, but to the Victorians were as ordinary as bread. Here, a tray of jellied eels glistens in the pale light. Transparent jelly quivers around pale pieces of fish, wobbling with every movement of the stall. At first glance, it may seem strange, almost daring, but to Londoners of the 19th century it was affordable, nourishing and oddly comforting. You spear a piece with a small fork and the jelly trembles before it gives way. The taste is cool, savoury, the texture soft but firm, a little like a custard that has learned to be practical. It tastes of the river itself, briny, mysterious, carrying a quiet strength. Next to it a bucket of whelks, small sea snails boiled and ready, their shells gleaming with damp. A vendor plucks one free with a pin, slides it out, and hands it to you with a grin. The taste is chewy, salty, faintly sweet like the echo of a tide against stone. It is food that reminds you of the sea's persistence, of waves that come again and again, never tiring. And there, pies stacked neatly, portable meals wrapped in crust. Meat pies with fillings rich and peppered, their steam rising as soon as the pastry is cracked. These are the traveller's companions, sturdy enough to be carried in a pocket, yet comforting enough to soften even the hardest morning. Bite into one and the crust crumbles in flakes, the filling savoury and warm. Isn't it curious how something so small can carry such generosity? A pie in the hand was a meal, a promise, and a comfort all at once. The vendors call in voices roughened by wind, their cries weaving together with the gulls and the clatter of hooves on nearby bridges. A man advertises eels, a woman praises her pies, a boy runs past shouting about chestnuts roasted in small iron pans. The street is alive, every voice a note, every smell a chord. You pause with your pie, leaning against a stone wall overlooking the river. Steam curls upward, mixing with the morning fog. The taste of pepper lingers on your tongue, warming your chest against the chill. Below, the Thames moves steadily, wide and grey, carrying barges loaded with coal, timber and produce. The river is both lifeblood and memory, its smell as much a part of the city as the ringing of bells or the ticking of clocks. Of course, not all smells are pleasant. By the 1850s, the Thames was already notorious for its filth, culminating in the great stink of 1858, when hot weather turned the river's odours into something unbearable. Imagine, if you will, the mix of sewage and smoke, strong enough to drive even Parliament indoors. And yet, in quieter hours, like this imagined morning, the river could still surprise with its resilience, its water reflecting sunlight, its banks alive with trade and chatter, its food stalls serving nourishment to rich and poor alike. You finish the pie, brushing crumbs from your lap. The whelk's salt still lingers. The eel's cool firmness still hums on your tongue. These flavours, strange yet grounding, remind you that the Victorian city was not made only of drawing rooms and parlours. It was also built on these streets, where ordinary people ate standing, leaning, walking. A bell tolls from a nearby church, low and steady, mingling with the cries of vendors. Somewhere a dog barks, wagons rumble, children laugh as they chase one another between carts. The city is fully awake now, alive with rhythm, and you, with the taste of the river still in your mouth, stand quietly at its edge, letting the sounds wash over you like another tide. The river scene will not wait. It shifts, it bustles, it moves on. But the memory of those flavours, curious and comforting, will follow you back into the calm of the house, a reminder that beyond every quiet room lies a world noisy, messy, and endlessly alive. And as you turn away from the Thames, shawl drawn close, the mist thickens behind you, carrying the gulls, the vendors, the river itself back into the distance. The city's clamour fades behind you, and once more the house draws you inward, back toward its quieter rhythms. Today is not just any morning, it is wash day. In the Victorian household, wash day was an event, inevitable, exhausting, and oddly comforting in its familiarity. Monday, especially, was nearly sacred for laundry. To step into the scullery on such a morning was to step into a room already alive with steam, soap, and the sound of labour. The copper pot bubbles like a great cauldron, filled with water heated by the fire beneath. Steam rises in thick clouds, turning the air damp and warm, softening your hair and fogging the small panes of the window until the world outside disappears. Clothes soak in tubs nearby, pale arms of shirts and petticoats trailing over the edges like swimmers resting after laps. The smell is sharp but clean, lye soap, carbolic, and damp cotton mingling into a scent that feels bracing, almost medicinal. You roll up your sleeves, the fabric crackling as it bends, and take hold of the first garment. The water is hot enough to sting, but you bear it. Hands plunge, fabrics twist, and soap foams under your knuckles. The rhythm begins: scrub, wring, rinse, repeat. Have you ever noticed how repetitive work carries its own music? Each motion creates a sound, the slap of wet fabric against the board, the squeak of soap, the drip of water pattering back into the tub. Together they form a steady drumbeat that soothes even as it tires. A mangle stands ready in the corner, its heavy rollers waiting to press water from cloth. You feed a shirt between them, turning the handle with both hands. The wood creaks, the metal groans, and water streams out, pattering onto the floorboards. The shirt emerges flatter, lighter, changed. It is no longer heavy with dampness but ready for the line, where air will finish what fire and water began. Outside in the small yard, the clothesline stretches taut, pegged at either end. You carry the garments, basket creaking, and pin them up one by one. White sheets flap in the breeze, their corners snapping softly like flags of surrender. Stockings dangle, swaying gently. Petticoats ripple like sails. The line becomes a gallery of ordinary things elevated into banners, proclaiming both duty and care. The smell is fresher out here. Damp cloth mixes with the scent of earth, of coal smoke drifting from chimneys, of roses from the neighbour's garden. You pause a moment, breathing it in. Isn't it curious how laundry has its own beauty? Sheets dancing like theatre curtains, sunlight filtering through fabric, turning cotton translucent and linen golden. Back inside, the scullery hums on. A towel warms on the hearthrail, drying for later use. The copper still bubbles, releasing occasional sighs of steam. A half-eaten currant bun rests on the sill, forgotten between tasks, its sugar glistening faintly. You take a bite now, the sweetness reviving you, crumbs falling onto the wet boards. Even chores are easier when accompanied by something small and sweet. By noon the rhythm has slowed. The tubs are emptying, garments are strung across lines, and the scullery is quieter. The floor is damp, your arms ache, but there is satisfaction in the order left behind. The room smells of soap and steam, of effort transformed into cleanliness. You wipe your hands, the coarse towel scratching warmth back into your skin. A single stray sock overlooked rests on the table. You smile, pair it with its waiting twin, and feel the peculiar joy of completion, however small. The scullery exhales with you, content in its purpose. Wash day is not glamour, not indulgence, but it is grounding. It reminds you that the day is shaped not only by breakfasts and rivers, but by the quiet triumph of clean linen flapping against the sky. And so, with damp sleeves rolled back down, with the scent of soap still clinging to your fingers, you step once more into the hallway. The house welcomes you with cooler, drier air. The laundry will dry, the copper will cool, the mangle will rest. For now, the task is complete and the day stretches on. The house feels lighter now, the laundry pegged out, the scullery quieter, the scent of soap fading slowly from your hands. It is time for another ritual, one that belongs not to water or fire, but to fabric and form. Dressing once more, but this time with greater care, for the day now calls for appearances beyond the threshold. The wardrobe opens like a wooden guardian, hinges sighing as though they know the weight of the choices inside. Folded garments rest in careful stacks, colours subdued, deep browns, greys, creams, and the occasional daring shade of plum or green. On the rail, dresses and coats hang with patience, their sleeves drooping slightly, as if weary of waiting for you to claim them. By the mid-19th century, clothing was no longer just necessity, it was a statement. Ever since William Perkins' discovery of Mauve dye in 1856, the world of fashion had been brightened, at least at its edges. Imagine holding a ribbon dyed that new shade of mauve, the colour of violets pressed between pages, bruised yet beautiful, a tone the world had never quite seen before. To wear such a colour was to carry a whisper of progress, of invention, even in something as simple as a bow or sash. The corset waits, laces trailing like ribbons uncoiled. It is misunderstood, often thought only as a cage, yet in truth it could feel like a pause, a punctuation mark shaping posture and breath. To lace it is a process, slow and deliberate. Hooks catch, ties tighten, and your body learns to stand differently, shoulders drawn back, waist drawn in. The sensation is both firm and secure, like being gently reminded to stand tall. Over it goes the chemise, the petticoat, the skirt. Crinolines, if you wear them, swish faintly, the hoops creating space between fabric and body, a personal climate of air and movement. Have you ever noticed how clothing can create its own weather? The layers keep you warm in winter, airy in summer, always reminding you that you're wrapped not only in cloth, but in ritual. Gloves wait on the table, pale leather softening from use. You slide them on, each finger finding its home, the seams stretching faintly as they mould to your hands. Gloves are a kind of veil, hiding skin, smoothing imperfections, presenting only a polished surface to the world. They whisper against your fingertips, a reminder of the day's formality. Then, the bonnet. Ribbons tie beneath your chin, framing your face in fabric and shade. The mirror greets you with a face transformed, not just washed and combed, but framed, shaped, presented. Isn't it curious how a bonnet can change not only how others see you, but how you see yourself? The tilt of its brim alters your posture. The feel of its ribbons alters your confidence. Clothing is both armour and expression, a language without words. A small brooch pins at your collar, perhaps a cameo or a lock of hair set behind glass. Such tokens were common, carrying with them memory and sentiment. To wear one was to carry a piece of someone else close to your heart, hidden in plain sight. And at last, a shawl, drawn across your shoulders. Its wool scratches faintly, but its warmth is dependable. It smells of lavender from the drawer, and faintly of the fire, a mingling of comfort and duty. You pull it close, and the house seems to nod in approval. Have you ever noticed how dressing can change the mood of a day? In the quiet of the bedroom, in the hush of the wardrobe, you transform yourself from the soft creature of sleep into someone prepared to step into the world. It is not haste, it is ritual. Every button, every ribbon, every fold is an act of preparation, a way of shaping not just fabric, but time. When you step away from the mirror, shoes buttoned or boots laced, you feel not only clothed but steadied. The house approves, its silence carrying a kind of applause. The hallway seems wider, the light brighter, the floorboards smoother beneath your tread. Dressed, adorned, prepared, you are ready for whatever the day holds beyond the door. The wardrobe closes behind you with a soft thud, its duty fulfilled. The room breathes out, lighter now that its garments have been chosen, its purpose served. And as you step toward the landing, shawl pulled snug, bonnet ribbons tied, the house carries you forward again, from private ritual to public day. The wardrobe has done its work, the bonnet is tied, and the shawl rests warmly on your shoulders. But before the front door can open, there is another world within the house that stirs with its own rhythm, the nursery, a place where mornings arrive with a different voice, brighter, messier, full of chatter and crumbs. The nursery is not quiet like the bedroom, nor industrious like the scullery. It is a room alive with small movements, the scrape of toy soldiers being arranged on the hearth, the creak of a rocking horse swaying slowly, the muffled giggles that burst and vanish like bubbles. The air smells faintly of soap and wool, mixed with the sweetness of bread just buttered. Curtains are pulled back here earlier, for children are impatient for light. The sun falls onto scattered blocks, tin whistles and dolls' bonnets, turning ordinary objects into treasures. Breakfast in the nursery is simpler but somehow more delightful. Thick slices of bread spread with jam or honey, sticky enough to glue fingers together. A jug of milk stands ready, cool and white, poured into mugs that chip at the edges but never complain. Porridge waits in a pot, spooned into bowls with more enthusiasm than accuracy, leaving trails across the table. You take your place, and a small hand offers you a corner of bread, already bitten but freely shared. Isn't it funny how generosity is easiest for the young, who give without measuring? The sounds of the nursery are their own kind of symphony. Wooden tops spin and hum. A doll is scolded in serious tones for misbehaving. A tin soldier is promoted to admiral without hesitation. Chairs scrape, spoons clatter, and laughter rolls in waves that make even the fire seem to crackle in amusement. Have you ever noticed how the laughter of children seems to fill spaces no curtain could ever block? It climbs the walls, bounces from ceiling to floor, and lingers even when silence returns. After the Education Act of 1870, more mornings were shaped by the prospect of school. Slates were stacked, chalk was counted, and boots were laced for small feet. Imagine tying those laces, fingers fumbling over knots, while a child squirms with impatience, already eager to run. Gloves are paired, hats found, and coats buttoned, though at least one item always goes missing until discovered in the most unlikely place. A glove in the coal scuttle, a cap beneath the piano stool. There is a peculiar hush that falls when a child concentrates. Perhaps it is on spreading honey across bread, or balancing a block on top of a tower, or carefully tracing a letter on a slate. The room holds its breath, honouring the moment, and in that hush the world outside feels far away. You sip your tea quietly, not to disturb the delicate cathedral of focus being built by small hands. Then chaos resumes, bread crust dropped, dolls abandoned mid-conversation, boots finally found, a final gulp of milk, a final swipe of jam across a cheek, and the nursery empties into the hallway with a rush of footsteps and laughter. Doors open, coats are flung on, the air fills with the smell of wool and soap mingling one last time before the street claims them. The door closes behind them, and suddenly the nursery is quiet. Toys rest where they were left, chairs sit skewed, and crumbs lie scattered across the table. Yet the silence is not empty. It is full of presence, as though the laughter still hums faintly in the corners, waiting to be woken again in the afternoon. You stand for a moment, looking at the disarray and feel no urge to tidy just yet. Disorder here is not untidy. It is proof of life, of energy, of morning spent in delight. The fire sighs, the rocking horse sways gently once more, and the house exhales, pleased that its youngest voices have done their part in welcoming the day. And so, with shawl still drawn and bonnet ribbons firm beneath your chin, you leave the nursery behind, carrying with you the echo of laughter, the stickiness of honey, and the warmth of small hands briefly clutching yours. The nursery has settled into silence, toys still scattered, crumbs waiting patiently for a broom. The sound of children's footsteps fades down the street, their laughter trailing like ribbons in the morning air. Now, the house feels wider, calmer, and it is the perfect moment to think of travel, of leaving the familiar rooms behind and waking somewhere new. By the 1840s, the railways had begun stitching the countryside together with iron threads. Journeys that once took days could now be done in hours. And so, imagine waking not in your own city bedroom, but in a guest chamber of a country home, far from the noise of London, far from the cries of milkmen and newspaper boys. The air here is different. It tastes faintly of hay, sweet and dry, with a hint of dew still clinging to the fields. A window left slightly ajar lets in the low drone of bees negotiating with roses outside, their sound steady, drowsy, almost like a hymn. The light is softer too, filtered not through soot or smoke but through clean country air, falling onto whitewashed walls and wooden beams with a gentleness that city mornings rarely know. You lie beneath a patchwork quilt, its squares uneven but charming, each piece a memory stitched from old garments. One corner might be from a dress long outgrown, another from a work shirt patched too often to keep. The quilt feels like history layered across your body, warm and heavy yet filled with quiet stories. You stretch and the bed creaks. A simpler bed, no grand canopy here, just sturdy oak and honest mattress, its ropes tightened neatly, its feathers fluffed by diligent hands. The sounds are not of carriages but of roosters, not of newspaper cries but of bird song. In the yard below, chickens scuttle and cluck, and a cow lowing in the distance suggests fresh milk is already waiting. The country has its own symphony, one of feathers and hooves, wings and bells, softer but no less certain than the clamour of the city. Breakfast here is a different feast. Fresh eggs, their yolks as bright as small suns, slip from the pan with a hiss of butter. Cheese cut from a wheel, firm and squeaky between your teeth, its flavour sharp with the grass of nearby fields. Bread baked just yesterday, its crust thick and golden, still carrying the faintest warmth when sliced. You bite into an apple from the orchard, its crispness cracking like a new idea, juice running sharp and sweet over your tongue. Isn't it curious how food tastes louder in the quiet of the countryside? As if each bite has more space to echo. The washstand here looks out upon hedgerows. As you dip water from its jug, you catch sight of rabbits darting between grasses, their ears twitching at the rustle of the breeze. The act of washing feels less like duty and more like greeting, a way of joining yourself to the freshness of the morning. The towel, rough and clean, smells faintly of lavender dried in bunches from the garden. There is no rush in a country house morning. Time feels generous, patient. The kettle hums, not hisses. The mantel clock ticks, but with a slower confidence, as if each second were meant to be savoured. Even the floorboards creak more kindly, their voices softer, as though softened by generations of footsteps wearing paths from bed to basin, basin to table, table to door. You pocket a small scone, wrapped in paper still warm from the oven. Provision, not indulgence. Its crumb is dense, its top brushed with milk before baking, giving it a faint sheen. Spread with a dab of butter, it becomes both fuel and comfort, ready to travel with you on the train that will whistle later. Isn't it endearing how country food insists on being practical, yet ends up being beautiful all the same? You step to the window once more. Fields stretch out, hedgerows dividing them like tidy paragraphs. A horse pulls a cart along a lane, its hooves muffled in the soft earth. The air is cool on your cheeks, but the shawl is enough, its wool holding yesterday's sun like a promise. The room behind you is simple, the bed neatly made, the basin emptied, the quilt folded back, yet it feels whole, complete, a place where waking has been both gentle and steady. And so, with the scone in your pocket, the shawl across your shoulders, and the scent of hay still clinging to your breath, you step from the guest room into the hall. The country morning has shaped you differently, slower, steadier, as if reminding you that not all mornings need to rush. The door opens to the sound of bees and the smell of grass, and the day beyond waits, wide and generous. The countryside has offered its gentle quilt, its bees and its scones, but now the scene changes. Imagine waking not to fields and hedgerows, but to the sharp, salt-kissed air of the seaside. By the 1870s, railways made such journeys possible for many, and the Victorian taste for taking the waters or escaping to the coast turned sleepy seaside towns into bustling little havens. The morning here begins with sound, not the clatter of hooves, not the crow of a rooster, but the gulls, endlessly circling, endlessly arguing, their cries carrying into every corner of the lodging house. Their voices are raucous, insistent, but also oddly comforting, like the sea itself reminding you it is always near. Beneath them comes the hush and crash of the tide, the slow breathing of waves against sand and stone. If you listen closely, you can almost hear pebbles tumbling as the water pulls them back, a soft clatter that seems like the sea playing with marbles. The air tastes of salt before you even leave the bed. It tingles faintly on your lips, prickles in your nose, and lingers in your hair. Open the window and the breeze sweeps in at once, cool and damp, carrying not only the sea but also the faint smoke of chimney pots and the sweetness of buns baking at a nearby shop. The curtains billow, the quilt stirs, and the room feels suddenly larger, as if the ocean itself has leaned in to say good morning. The lodging is simple: zinc tub in the corner, basin on the washstand, bed dressed with plain cotton sheets bleached stiff from salt air. You pour water into the tub, and the sound rings bright, almost metallic, like a teacup struck with a spoon. The towel is coarse, but when you rub your face dry, the scratch feels invigorating, a partner to the sea breeze outside. Breakfast in a seaside town has its own delights. On the table you find potted shrimp packed with butter and spice, spread generously onto hot toast. The butter melts, carrying the shrimp's briny sweetness across your tongue. You close your eyes, and for a moment it feels as though you are tasting the very sea. Alongside comes a slice of bread thick with jam, balancing the salt with sugar, reminding you that comfort and boldness can sit side by side. Tea steams, stronger than ever, poured dark into cups, sweetened just enough to soften its edge. Children's laughter drifts up from the street. Already they are clutching buckets and spades, racing toward the sand. Mothers follow with parasols, fathers with rolled-up trousers and determined looks of relaxation. You smile, biting into your toast, as the holiday energy swells outside like a tide of its own. Isn't it curious how the sea makes people behave differently? Freer, louder, as though the rhythm of waves loosens the rhythm of manners. Later you'll walk along the promenade. The bandstand will echo with brass instruments, the scent of oysters will mix with the tang of salt, and stalls will sell rock candy striped in colours too bright to be natural. But here in the lodging house the morning is quieter, framed by the crash of waves and the squeals of gulls. You wring out a bathing costume, damp from yesterday's dip. Its wool is heavy, reluctant to dry, smelling faintly of salt and sun. You hang it across a chair, imagining the bravery it takes to plunge into the sea's cold arms at dawn. Victorians swore by its health-giving properties, though one suspects part of the ritual was simply the joy of proving you could withstand the shock. The mantel clock ticks, steady even in this borrowed room, as though keeping company with the tide. You sip your tea, you chew your bread, and the sea whispers through the window, patient and unchanging. When you rise, shawl pulled close against the breeze, you feel the floorboards creak softly beneath your boots, as though the house itself is leaning toward the shore. The gulls wheel, the waves sigh, and the morning stretches wide and salt-bright before you. The seaside has its own way of waking you, not with stillness, but with endless movement, reminding you that time, like the tide, always comes and always goes. The sea has receded behind us now, its salt still clinging faintly to lips and shawls. We return once more to the city, to the house with its quiet rooms and steady clocks. The morning here is not shaped by gulls or fields, but by the pulse of industry, the hum of work, the stirrings of neighbours already setting about their duties. And in this particular chamber, the day begins with the familiar companionship of books and papers. The study is a different kind of bedroom, a place where some preferred to sleep amidst shelves of knowledge, or at least to rise there and greet the morning with the company of ink and parchment. The air smells faintly of leather bindings, candle wax, and dust shaken loose by the first drafts of the window. It is the scent of words waiting to be read. The desk holds a stack of correspondence, letters folded neatly, some unopened, others already read and tied back with ribbon. A quill lies beside them, its nib stained dark, resting as though it too has slept. Imagine lighting a small lamp, the flame catching in its glass chimney, and settling into the chair with a fresh sheet of paper. The scratch of the pen is the first sound of the day here. No kettle, no hoofbeat, only the quiet hiss of ink meeting paper. Breakfast is modest in such a room. A slice of bread, perhaps, spread with butter and taken absently between lines written. A cup of tea, cooling unnoticed as the mind follows its own thoughts across the page. Sometimes a biscuit is dipped absent-mindedly, crumbling into the saucer. Isn't it strange how food tastes different when it is consumed without noticing? how the memory of the words often lingers longer than the flavour itself. The study has its own music. The rustle of paper, the faint groan of the chair as you lean back, the tick of the mantel clock measuring each pause. Outside, the street hums faintly, but it is muffled here, as though the walls have agreed to keep distractions at bay. A carriage might pass, a vendor might shout, but the sound arrives softened, like echoes in a library. You sip the tea at last, lukewarm now, but still strong, the tannins clinging stubbornly to your tongue. The taste is grounding, reminding you that even in thought the body requires its anchors. You nibble another corner of bread, its crust slightly tougher than yesterday's, its crumbs soft but no longer fresh. Yet there is comfort in such simplicity. Bread and tea, ink and paper, light and dust. The books lining the shelves seem to watch. Some stand proudly, spines unbroken, while others sag with use, pages dog-eared, their margins crowded with penciled notes. Here, history is not something distant, but something that leans close, whispering across centuries. You run a finger along a spine and feel the raised ridges of gold lettering, the embossed title half worn away. Isn't it soothing to think of how many mornings have begun with the turning of these same pages? A draught stirs the curtains. Outside, bells ring from a nearby church, their tones heavy and resonant, reminding you that time belongs not only to the ticking of clocks, but to the measured tolling of hours across a city. You pause, listening, letting each peal sink into you like drops of water into stone. On the desk, beside the letters, lies a newspaper folded to the front page. Headlines announce debates in Parliament, new inventions, distant conflicts. The ink smudges faintly on your fingertips as you unfold it. You read slowly, letting the cadence of Victorian prose wash over you, heavy with detail, unhurried in its explanations. The words, though written for urgency, now feel timeless, part of the morning ritual of turning, scanning, folding again. The study is not loud, not bright, but it carries a gravity all its own. To wake here is to wake with thought, with letters, with the quiet scratch of ink. It is a slower kind of rising, more inward, as though the day begins not with the body, but with the mind. When at last you set the pen aside, blotting the ink with a square of paper, the room seems to sigh in approval. The letter is written, the bread consumed, the teacup empty. The books settle back into stillness, the quill rests once more. You rise, smoothing your shawl across your shoulders, the scent of leather and dust clinging faintly to the wool. The door opens with a small creak, and the hallway waits, brighter now, carrying with it the promise of the wider day. And as you step away, the study lingers behind you. Quiet, thoughtful, a room where mornings are measured in ink rather than footsteps. The study has whispered its thoughts, the ink has dried, and the morning has slipped quietly into its middle hours. But in a Victorian home, there was another gentle pulse to the day, one less formal than the dining room, less industrious than the scullery. It was the parlour, a room meant for sitting, for conversation, for receiving visitors, and on mornings like this, for simply watching the world drift by the window. Step softly into it now. The parlour greets you with warmth, not the heat of a kitchen fire, but a more measured glow from a coal grate carefully tended. The room smells faintly of polished wood and dried flowers, lavender again making its subtle presence known. The wallpaper is patterned with vines and roses, their outlines softened by morning light filtering through lace curtains. The furniture, upholstered in velvet or brocade, sits with quiet dignity, cushions plump but not extravagant. Everything here seems to whisper, you may rest a while, but do so properly. On the small table by the window, a tray has been set. Not a full breakfast now, but something lighter. A plate of scones, split and spread with butter that melts into their crumb. A dish of jam, its ruby sheen catching the light. And a pot of tea, fresh and steaming, pouring into delicate china cups that clink softly when set down. You take a scone, its edges golden and crisp, and bite. The butter and jam mingle, sweetness and salt dancing together, and the taste lingers pleasantly, encouraging another sip of tea. The parlour has its own music. The clock on the mantel ticks with more ceremony here, as though proud of its role. A canary in a cage near the window trills now and then, bright notes that slip easily into the stillness. Outside, you hear the occasional carriage pass, its wheels muffled by distance, the clip of hooves echoing like punctuation marks on the street. Have you ever noticed how sounds, when filtered by curtains, seem to grow softer, kinder, as though the fabric itself has agreed to translate the world into gentler tones? A book lies open on the side table, its spine cracked from use. The story inside might be Dickens, or perhaps Mrs. Gaskell, novels of industry, of hearths and mills, stories of the very world you inhabit. You read a page or two, the words flowing slowly, but soon you set it aside, for the room itself is novel enough. The parlour is not for rushing, it is a place where one can sip tea and let thought wander, unhurried. Sometimes a visitor might arrive. The maid would announce them, and the parlour would transform instantly into a stage. Conversation would flow, topics ranging from the weather to politics, but always in tones measured by manners. Cups would be refilled, scones politely declined but ultimately eaten, and the room would hum with gentle civility. Today, however, the chairs remain empty, waiting patiently for voices that do not come. The parlour is also where needlework rests, half-finished projects folded neatly into baskets. Embroidery hoops hold roses caught mid-bloom, stitches neat and deliberate. You run your fingers over the threads and feel the patience woven into them. Hours of quiet labour, each stitch a small offering to order and beauty. Isn't it curious how such work, though repetitive, can be as calming as prayer, the rhythm of needle and thread binding time as much as cloth? You glance at the mantel, where framed photographs sit. Sepia faces of family, some smiling faintly, some solemn, all frozen in time. Their eyes meet yours across the years, reminding you that mornings, whether filled with scones or sermons, with laughter or silence, are shared by generations, layered like pages in the same book. The tea grows cooler, the scone crumbs scatter across the plate, the fire burns lower, and still the parlour holds you gently, unwilling to let you rush away. It is a room that values pause, that insists on calm. To wake in such a room is to be reminded that the day need not always advance like a march. Sometimes it may unfold like a sigh. At last you rise, smoothing the cushion you sat upon, folding the shawl back across your shoulders. The canary chirps once more as if bidding farewell, the mantel clock ticks approvingly, and the parlour settles back into its expectant stillness. You step into the hallway once more, the taste of jam still sweet on your lips, the softness of velvet still echoing in your fingertips, carrying with you the calm weight of a morning well spent in quiet company. The parlour has released you gently, its fire dimming and its canary humming one last bright note. Beyond its velvet calm, the house draws you onward to another essential space, the dining room. Though you have already eaten, the room itself is a character in the household, one that wakes each morning with its own sense of ceremony, even when not set for a grand meal. The dining room greets you with polish and symmetry. The table, long and sturdy, stretches like a stage awaiting its performance. Its surface gleams faintly in the filtered light, smelling of beeswax rubbed in careful circles by patient hands. Chairs line it neatly, their backs straight, their cushions plump, as though standing at attention for unseen guests. The mantel holds not toys or trinkets, but candlesticks and perhaps a clock, their arrangement deliberate, almost military in its order. At this hour the room is hushed. The heavy curtains mute the outside world, though a faint rumble of carriages seeps through. Sunlight, softened by the fabric, lays wide golden stripes across the carpet. Dust motes swim lazily in those stripes, the only movement in the room besides your own. You walk its length, your footsteps cushioned, and feel as though you're pacing an empty theatre before the actors arrive. On the sideboard, a few dishes remain from breakfast, perhaps a silver butter dish, its lid slightly ajar, a half-empty pot of jam, its spoon resting askew, a crumb or two of bread scattered like footprints of a vanished feast. They are small remnants, but they speak of life, of conversation that once filled this space only an hour ago. Isn't it curious how even crumbs can hold the memory of voices? The dining room has a deeper voice than the parlour. Where the parlour encourages sighs and whispers, the dining room remembers laughter, debates, and the clatter of forks against plates. To sit here in the morning quiet is to feel the echo of all those sounds pressed into the walls, waiting for evening to draw them out again. Imagine dinner here in its full array. Joints of beef, pudding steaming, vegetables glistening with butter, silver dishes reflecting candlelight, servants stepping quietly to refill glasses. Even in the calm of morning, the table seems to anticipate such scenes, carrying the weight of expectation in its polished wood. But for now, the air smells not of roasts or sauces, but faintly of tea leaves and bread crusts. You pour yourself another cup, left warming in a small pot, and sip. The tea is weaker now, the second steeping, but it still carries comfort. Beside it sits a heel of bread, tougher than the first slices, but spread with jam it becomes once again a small pleasure. You eat slowly, letting the quiet of the dining room expand around you, its silence vast but not unfriendly. The portraits on the walls watch with solemn faces, ancestors perhaps, or admired statesmen, their eyes following you as you sip. Their painted gazes seem to approve of measured mornings, of order maintained, of the room kept tidy even when unused. You smile faintly, as though nodding to them in agreement. Have you ever noticed how rooms themselves can carry mood? The parlour encourages pause, the kitchen hums with energy, the nursery bursts with laughter, but the dining room insists on dignity. Even in solitude, it asks you to sit straighter, to speak softer, to remember that meals are not only nourishment but rituals of civility. The fire here is low, nearly out, its embers faint. You poke it absently, and it crackles once, then settles again. The sound is enough to make the silence feel companionable, like a friend clearing their throat in the corner. When at last you set your cup aside, the dining room seems to sigh in return. It will wait now until evening, until lamps are lit and voices gather. For you, it has offered only calm and quiet, a reminder that dignity lives even in crumbs and silence. You smooth the cloth on the table's edge, brush a stray crumb to the floor, and step away. The door closes softly behind you, leaving the room to its own stillness, its own memory of laughter past and laughter yet to come. And so the morning carries you onward again, through polished halls and patient rooms, toward the next quiet ritual of the day. The dining room has offered its dignity, its solemn polish and its crumbs of memory. Now the house guides you upward again, past the ticking clock in the hall, to a smaller chamber less often spoken of but vital in every Victorian home, the servants' room. To wake here is to wake differently, with less velvet and more plain wood, less leisure and more purpose. The room is narrow, the ceiling lower than in the family's chambers. Its window is small, admitting only a sliver of light, but that light is sharp and honest, falling onto a plain iron bedstead with a thin mattress. No feather valleys here, only straw or flock, covered with a sheet tucked tightly and a wool blanket folded with care. The smell is simpler too. Soap, starch, and faint coal dust from the scuttle carried up each night. The servants' day begins earlier than the master's. By the time others stir, fires are already lit, kettles boiled, tables laid. Here, morning is not a slow unveiling, but a brisk command. Boots must be blacked until they shine, coal scuttles refilled, grates swept of last night's ashes. You can almost hear the brisk scrape of the shovel, the clink of coal, the whisper of a brush across iron bars. Yet even in this smaller room, there are moments of comfort. A chipped mug sits on the sill, steam rising faintly from tea poured quickly before work resumes. A crust of bread rests beside it, hard but filling, spread with drippings saved from yesterday's roast. The taste is plain, salty and grounding, the kind of food that steadies rather than indulges. Isn't it curious how sustenance, even without sweetness, can feel like strength in the mouth? The servants' chamber has its own music too. The rustle of simple linen dresses or sturdy trousers pulled on quickly, the clatter of a bucket, the creak of boots laced hastily, and beneath it all, the faint thrum of the house itself waking, doors opening, stairs echoing with footsteps, kettles beginning to sing below. On the wall a small cross may hang, or a faded print of a country scene, a reminder of home left behind. A box beneath the bed might hold letters, tied carefully, their paper soft from rereading. In these tokens lies another kind of richness, quieter but just as deep as the velvet drapes in the master's rooms. When the chores are done, the servant returns briefly here, sleeves damp from scrubbing, fingers reddened by lie. They sit on the edge of the bed for a moment, just a breath's rest, and the mattress sighs beneath them. The room is plain, but it does not scold. It accepts their weariness, holds it gently, then nudges them onward again. The taste of morning here is different too. No kippers or currant buns, but porridge made thin with water, eaten quickly, or a heel of bread dipped into broth. Yet even this, in its own way, carries comfort, fuel for hours of labour ahead. The steam from the bowl curls upward, softening the edges of the narrow room, and for a moment it feels almost luxurious, as if warmth itself were a gift. Have you ever noticed how small rooms can feel vast when filled with thought? Here, silence hums louder, each creak of the floorboard sharper, each gust of wind at the window more insistent. Yet the stillness is also a companion, one that steadies you before the next flurry of tasks. As the morning grows brighter, the servant's room empties, its plain bed made neatly, its mug washed and set aside. The house depends upon such unseen steadiness, upon these quieter beginnings that ripple outward until every parlour and dining room glows. To wake here is to wake into duty, but also into resilience. You smooth the blanket, straighten the chair, and step away. The door closes softly, leaving behind the faint scent of soap and starch, the echo of hurried footsteps, the quiet strength of those who wake first and sleep last. And so the morning carries you on again, through stairwells and silence, into the broader hum of the house now fully alive. The servant's room fades into silence, its iron bed made neatly, its chipped mug set aside. You descend once more into the pulse of the house, and this time it is the drawing room that calls. A space neither as stiff as the dining room nor as modest as the servant's chamber, but something in between. A room for living, for lingering, for waking with a softer kind of company. The drawing room greets you with light. Curtains have been pulled back and morning pours in, softened through lace but generous nonetheless. It falls across the patterned carpet, across the polished surfaces of tables, across the armchairs that wait like old friends with open arms. The air smells faintly of coal smoke still clinging from last night's fire, mixed now with the fresher scent of flowers arranged in a vase upon the mantel, perhaps roses or lilies, their fragrance just beginning to drift. You settle into one of the armchairs, its fabric worn in the places where others have rested, its cushions yielding just enough to cradle without swallowing you. Beside it rests a small table, upon which lies the morning's newspaper, folded and ready. You unfold it carefully, the paper crackling softly, ink smudging faintly onto your fingers. The headlines speak of railways expanding, of speeches in Parliament, of discoveries in faraway lands. Each story is both distant and immediate, carried to you through the printed word, now sipped alongside your tea. Yes, tea again, because in this room it is always waiting. The pot is kept near the hearth, the cups delicate, their porcelain thin enough to catch the light when raised. You pour, the liquid streaming in a thin ribbon, steam rising to meet your face. A slice of Madeira cake waits on the plate, dense and golden, its crumb sweet but not cloying. You bite into it slowly, the sugar softening on your tongue, the flavour lingering like a gentle echo of yesterday's sunshine. The drawing room has its own soundtrack, quieter than the parlour's bird song, steadier than the dining room's echoes. Here it is the crackle of the fire when stoked, the soft rustle of skirts as someone crosses the carpet, the faint scratch of a pen as letters are written at the escritoire by the window. And outside, faint but present, the city continues its chorus. Street vendors calling, carriage wheels clattering, the occasional bark of a dog. All softened, all distant, as though the drawing room insists that the world must pass through lace and tea before reaching you. On the mantel, small ornaments gleam in the shifting light. A porcelain shepherdess, perhaps, or a tiny clock chiming softly. Photographs lean in their frames, sepia faces watching with solemn eyes, their silence making them seem both present and eternal. A book of poetry lies nearby, its pages marked with a ribbon. You lift it, read a stanza or two, and then let it rest again, for the room itself is poetry enough. Have you ever noticed how spaces like this encourage a different kind of waking? Not the brisk rising of the scullery, not the noisy burst of the nursery, not the formality of the dining table. Here, waking is allowed to be gradual, like mist lifting from a field. You sip tea, you nibble cake, you turn a page, you watch the dust motes dance. Nothing demands, nothing insists. The clock on the wall ticks steadily, its pendulum swinging in patient arcs. Time moves, yes, but gently. Each second feels softer, as though cushioned by fabric and firelight. Even your own movement seems slower, as if the air itself asks you not to hurry. When the cup is empty and the cake gone, you lean back in the chair, eyes tracing the patterns of wallpaper, perhaps a spray of ivy leaves, perhaps curling vines. They seem to climb as you watch, as if reminding you that life continues to grow quietly, even in stillness. At last you rise, smoothing the chair cushion, folding the newspaper once more. The drawing room remains calm, its tea things waiting to be cleared, its flowers still bright, its ornaments steady in their places. It will wait for the next moment of pause, the next quiet visitor, the next slow unfolding of morning. And as you step out, shawl adjusted, bonnet ribbons smoothed, the drawing room sighs behind you, content in its role as the house's quiet heart. The drawing room has given its calm, its Madeira cake and lace-filtered light, and now the house leads us again into a chamber that often went unnoticed in polite conversation, but was essential to daily life, the pantry. To wake here, in the half-shadow of shelves and jars, is to wake among the quiet guardians of sustenance. The pantry is cool, deliberately so. Its stone floor holds the night's chill, and its air smells faintly of flour, dried herbs, and damp wood. Sunlight enters only in narrow strips, glancing across rows of shelves stacked neatly with jars, crocks, and tins. It is a room of order, where every item has its place, and the morning begins not with chatter but with inventory. On the top shelves sit preserves, jars of jam, their wax seals tight, each one a memory of summer fruit captured in glass. Raspberry, blackberry, gooseberry. They line up like jewels, their colours softened by dust. Below, sacks of flour and sugar rest heavy in their bins, their surfaces smoothed by scoops drawn again and again. Loaves of bread, baked the day before, are stacked beneath cloths to keep them soft. Cheese sits wrapped in muslin, its scent faintly sharp, promising both nourishment and comfort. You take a small knife and slice a corner from one of the cheeses. The taste is tangy, earthy, lingering long after the bite is swallowed. Paired with a piece of brown bread, it becomes both plain and perfect. Humble food, but food that steadies. Isn't it curious how simplicity, when eaten in quiet, feels richer than extravagance eaten in haste? On a lower shelf sits a crock of pickles. The lid is lifted and the smell rises, sharp vinegar, biting and bright. You spear one with a fork and the crunch as you bite is loud in the stillness. The flavour shocks the tongue awake, sharper than tea, bolder than marmalade. It is a reminder that even preservation carries drama, that food meant to last the winter can still startle the senses. The pantry's sounds are hushed but distinctive. The scrape of a jar being shifted, the soft thud of a bin's lid closing, the faint rustle of flour as it resettles. Each sound is small, but together they make a music of provision, of care. The room does not boast like a dining hall or hum like a kitchen, but it carries a steady assurance. We are ready. You will not go hungry. A small ledger lies on the counter, its pages lined with neat script. Quantities are listed. Flour measured, sugar noted, jars tallied. The act of writing here feels like an extension of cooking, a way of preparing with ink as well as with hands. You dip the pen, add a line, and the pantry seems to nod approvingly, its order restored. On the sill, an apple rests, forgotten perhaps, its skin dulled but still fragrant. You pick it up, polish it absently against your shawl, and bite. The crisp crack of the flesh, the rush of juice. It is brighter, fresher, more immediate than anything sealed in jars or salted in crocks. For a moment you stand between two worlds, the preserved and the present, the stored and the fresh, both necessary, both comforting. Have you ever noticed how storage itself can be soothing? Rows of jars, sacks, loaves, they remind us not only of what is needed, but of what is enough. To wake in the pantry is to wake with reassurance, surrounded by quiet abundance, the whisper of survival in every neatly stacked shelf. When at last you close the ledger, wipe the knife, and set the apple core aside, the pantry settles back into its cool silence. The jars gleam faintly, the crocks rest undisturbed, the bread waits patiently beneath its cloth. The room will not clamour for attention, but it will hold steady day after day until called upon. You step back into the warmer hall, the air less sharp, the light more generous. Behind you, the pantry closes itself again, folding its cool order back into shadow, content to wait until the next quiet morning visit. The pantry door closes with a gentle thud, its shelves still standing guard over jam jars and pickles. The house breathes again, and this time it carries you toward a smaller, more personal ritual, the dressing table. To wake here is not about the grand sweep of meals or the hum of sculleries, but about mirrors, powders, and the quiet art of presenting oneself to the day. The dressing table waits near the window, a modest altar of wood draped with lace, its surface scattered with combs, brushes, and bottles. A mirror rises from it, oval and polished, though the glass is not flawless. If you tilt your head, the reflection bends slightly like a pond rippling under breeze. Light from the window falls across the surface, catching the silver tops of jars, glinting off the handles of brushes, warming the bristles until they almost glow. You sit upon the stool, the fabric cushion faintly indented from use, and take up the brush. Its handle is smooth, worn by countless hands, its bristles firm but gentle. You draw it slowly through your hair, the sound a faint whisper, like pages turning in a book. Each stroke smooths more than strands. It smooths thought itself, taming the restless edges of sleep, coaxing you further into wakefulness. Have you ever noticed how repetitive motions calm the mind as surely as they order the body? A small pot of powder sits beside the mirror, its lid creaking softly as you lift it. The powder inside is pale, faintly scented with violets. You dab it onto your cheeks, your nose, your forehead. The scent is subtle but insistent, a floral note that follows you like a shadow. It lingers in the air, mixing with the faint coal smoke from the grate, and suddenly the room feels transformed, half domestic, half theatrical, as if preparing for an unseen audience. On the tray rests a bottle of lavender water. You uncork it and the fragrance rushes out. Fresh, herbal, soothing, sharp. A dab at the wrists, a touch at the temples, and the scent cools you, clearing the last cobwebs of sleep. Isn't it curious how smells shape memory more strongly than sight? Years from now, one whiff of lavender might summon this morning in full, the brush, the mirror, the half-light on polished wood. You lean closer to the mirror. The face reflected there is not dramatically altered. No paint, no heavy cosmetics, but it is refreshed, framed by tidied hair and brightened by powder's subtle veil. The Victorian ideal was modest enhancement, a freshness rather than a transformation. To appear natural was itself an art as carefully practiced as any embroidery. The table also holds little keepsakes, perhaps a cameo brooch, perhaps a ribbon dyed with a new mauve colour so recently invented, perhaps a letter folded and kept beneath a dish. These are not just adornments, but small anchors of memory, ready to be chosen, pinned, tied, and carried into the day. You touch one of them absently, and the cool surface warms beneath your fingertips. On the sill, a dish of sugared almonds rests, a treat placed there the night before. You take one now, its shell crunching, its sweetness sharp at first, then mellowing as the almond reveals itself. It is a curious pairing, isn't it? Powder on the cheek, sugar on the tongue, both small indulgences that sweeten the transition from bed to world. The room's soundtrack is quieter than others. The scratch of the brush, the faint clink of glass jars, the low hum of a fly against the window. Beyond, the street murmurs, but here it feels far away, filtered through curtains and concentration. The dressing table creates its own cocoon, a space where time slows, where preparation is not a chore but a meditation. When you rise, hair smooth, shawl adjusted, ribbons tied, you glance once more into the mirror. The face looking back is familiar yet steadied, marked not by vanity but by readiness. You smile faintly at yourself, and the mirror, obliging as always, smiles back with the same quiet curve. The jars are closed, the brush laid neatly, the powder sealed, the almond dish left lighter by one. The dressing table rests, its duty fulfilled, until evening calls for it again. You step into the hall, the faint scent of lavender following like a companion, and the day feels nearer, sharper, yet softened by the calm ritual just past. The dressing table has closed its jars and folded back into stillness, lavender trailing gently in your wake. The house now leads you toward a room less personal yet vital to every Victorian morning. The library, or if not a full room, at least a quiet corner lined with books. To wake here is to rise into thought, into curiosity, into words waiting patiently for eyes to meet them. The library smells at once of dust and polish, of leather bindings and coal smoke. It is a scent unlike any other, aged paper carrying whispers of centuries, ink dried into permanence, the faint sharpness of glue holding spines together. The light here is filtered through heavy drapes, falling in long slants across shelves. Dust motes swim in those beams, dancing like notes of music across the air. You take a seat in a leather armchair near the hearth. Its cushions are firm, its surface cool, creaking softly as you lean back. Beside it stands a small table with a lamp and a stack of periodicals, the Illustrated London News perhaps, or Household Words. Their covers are crowded with engravings, black ink sharp and busy, promising stories of railways, politics, inventions, and far-off places you might never see but can imagine vividly. You unfold one, the paper crisp, the print dense. The type is small, the sentences long, their rhythm deliberate. You read slowly, letting each phrase unspool like a ribbon. A story about telegraph lines, perhaps, or about explorers in distant lands. Isn't it curious how the Victorian appetite for knowledge stretched across the world, yet could be satisfied by nothing more than ink and paper in a quiet room? On the desk nearby lies a plate with biscuits, plain, round, unadorned. You take one, bite into it, and the crumb is dry, steady, and unremarkable. Yet with tea poured from a waiting pot, the biscuit softens into comfort, its simplicity the perfect counterpoint to the rich flavours of ink and story. Together, they create a rhythm. Read a paragraph, sip, nibble, turn a page. The library has its own soundscape, the occasional pop from the fire, the quiet sigh of pages turning, the faint settling groan of wooden shelves bearing their weight of books. Outside, faintly a carriage passes, but it seems impossibly far away, as though this room exists in a pocket of stillness separate from the city. Even your own breathing feels louder here, a reminder that silence is not empty, but alive. Have you ever noticed how books change the air around them? A room filled with them feels heavier, not unpleasantly, but as though it carries the weight of all the voices pressed inside. Sitting here, you feel both smaller and larger, smaller in the face of so much knowledge, larger for being allowed to share in it. You close the periodical, place it neatly back upon the stack, and stand to wander the shelves. Spines gleam in rows, some gilded, some cracked, some bearing titles nearly worn away. You trail a finger along them, and the dust lifts faintly, the smell of old paper rising once more. A volume of poetry catches your eye, perhaps Tennyson, its cover embossed with curling leaves. You lift it down, open it, and let a line or two drift quietly into the air. The words seem to linger longer than speech, clinging to the curtains, folding themselves into the fabric of the room. On the mantel, a globe sits, its colours faded, its oceans pale blue, its continents edged with names already outdated. You spin it absently, and it turns with a low creak, reminding you that the world itself is never still, even if the room pretends otherwise. The tea is finished, the biscuit plate emptied but for crumbs. The fire burns low, the clock on the wall ticks once, twice, reminding you that the morning edges onward. You return the poetry to its place, smooth its spine into line with the others, and step back. The library exhales as you leave, its books settling once more into quiet patience, its dust motes returning to their slow dance. To wake here is to wake not into bustle or duty, but into thought, into the slow, steady rhythm of words that remind you of both the vastness and the intimacy of the world. You step into the hall again, the smell of leather and paper clinging faintly to your shawl, carrying with you the calm weight of knowledge and the quiet echo of voices from the page. The library has fallen quiet once more, its dust and pages settling into patience. And now the house guides you toward its last room of the morning, the chamber that leads outward, that holds the threshold between home and world, the vestibule, the front hall, the place where boots are buttoned, shawls adjusted, and breaths gathered before the door swings open. The space is smaller than dining rooms or parlours, yet it carries its own grandeur. A hall stand stands ready, bristling with umbrellas, walking sticks and bonnets. A looking glass hangs above a narrow table, its surface reflecting not so much your face as your readiness to step beyond. The tiles beneath your feet are cool, patterned in simple squares, their surface faintly echoing with every movement. The air smells of polish, of wool warmed by shoulders, of faint draughts seeping in beneath the heavy door. A pair of boots waits by the mat, brushed to a muted shine. Their leather is stiff but loyal, carrying the marks of cobblestones, mud, and the weight of countless errands. You kneel, fastening their buttons with a hook, each click soft and precise. Isn't it curious how even the act of fastening shoes feels like preparation for more than just walking? It feels like a declaration that you're stepping into the story beyond these walls. The umbrella stand rattles faintly as you choose one, the iron ring clinking against wood. Outside you hear the muffled voices of vendors, the faint clip of hooves, the creak of a cart. The city is already awake, its symphony waiting, but here in the vestibule the sound arrives softened, like a prelude before the main performance. On the small table rests a bowl of boiled sweets, their colours muted by morning light. You take one, unwrap its crinkling paper and let it melt slowly on your tongue. The taste is sharp, peppermint perhaps, or lemon, cutting through the softer flavours of breakfast past. It is a tiny burst of brightness, a companion for the first steps outdoors. Above, the clock chimes the hour. Its sound fills the vestibule, steady, dignified and final. Time has pressed its hand upon your shoulder. The morning is no longer waiting, it is here. You smooth your shawl, adjust your bonnet ribbons, glance once into the mirror. The face reflected there is not the drowsy one of the bedroom, nor the powdered one of the dressing table, but a face prepared, softened by ritual and steadied by the quiet rhythms of the house. Have you noticed how every room has carried you forward, one step at a time? The bed gave you rest, the washstand gave you freshness, the kitchen gave you warmth, the parlour gave you pause, the library gave you thought. Each space has been a chapter, each object a sentence, each sound a word. And now, at the vestibule, the story of the morning draws to its close. Your hand rests on the latch. The door is heavy, its brass cool beneath your palm. Beyond it lies the street, the clamour, the bustle of a Victorian day. Yet for one last moment, you linger in the vestibule, breathing the hush of the house, letting its calm settle into your chest. And then, gently, the door opens. Light floods in, brighter now, filled with the noise of hooves and wheels, of voices and bells, a city alive. You step forward, the boiled sweet still melting on your tongue, the shawl tight around your shoulders. The house behind you exhales one final time, releasing you into the day. And so, dear friend, our journey through the Victorian morning draws to its close. From the creak of the bedstead to the laughter of the nursery, from the scent of the pantry to the polish of the drawing room, we have walked each chamber, touched each ritual, and listened to each quiet sound. May these memories guide you into peaceful dreams, where mornings are always calm and rooms always gentle. If you drifted off along the way, let me know below. Sweet dreams, and thank you for sharing this time. Until next time, a soft whisper now, sleep well and good night.